Thank you, Can Corla. Minister, I hope you don't mind me addressing you, Can Corla, but when you were speaking earlier, I was just wondering if you were ever one of the Dáil Éireann that you spoke about. But not.
Anna Minic, your father. I was to this day.
Anyway, thanks again, Can Corla. But I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to speak on this Official Languages Amendment Bill. And I suppose my one regret, and it is a real regret, is that I am unable to use our first language, and I truly envy those who can. But nonetheless, that doesn't in any way diminish my firm belief that strong measures need to be taken to facilitate greater use of our language, more familiarity with our language, and the need to guarantee our citizens that they can use the medium Irish when availing of services from the state. For too long, I think we as a country, and I include myself in this, but I think for too long we've paid a certain amount of lip service to promoting the use of our language in the first place. And I think legislation guaranteeing citizens a certain level of service through Irish is a positive move. Now, among those who have walked the walk, not just paying lip service, are those who have established the more than 250 Gaelscoileanna that are throughout the country. And it's a huge undertaking to establish any school. And I think the commitment and the determination of those who have driven the setting up of our Gaelscoileanna is to be hugely admired. And I would like to mention Éireann Lochgilla, which is established in Mercy College in Sligo, where I had the privilege to teach for 20 years. The Éireann was established after I left. That doesn't say anything, but it was and is a very successful undertaking, and it has contributed so much to the use of the language in an everyday way. It makes the language accessible to all who want to access it, and it normalises its use. Now, there are an increasing number who speak the language and who want to speak the language, and that's why we need a comprehensive policy around the teaching of Irish from preschool up to third level, in fact, lifelong education. And it must be part, I think, of our lifelong learning. And then people like me, who have a basic knowledge of the language, will have an opportunity to improve our use of the language. Indeed, Scéimeanna na Pobal Gaeilge, run by First na Gaeilge, is an example of lifelong learning because it's an Irish in the community scheme. Community development through the Irish language, and it's reaching people whose formal education opportunities have probably passed at this stage and who are finished with formal education. But again, it's putting the language at the centre of people's everyday lives, and that programme needs extra supports. We need to develop Irish language centres. Again, this normalises the use of the language in our everyday activities. So in that context, this bill is very relevant. It's the state providing services to its citizens, both inside and outside the Gaeltacht, through the medium of Irish. I think this bill will help to underpin much of the voluntary community action that has been taken to promote the language, and of course it will recognise the rights of Irish speakers in Gaeltacht areas and indeed elsewhere. Now, I think one of the most important aspects of this bill is the need to include timescales in the actions proposed. A 20% recruitment target in the public service for Irish speakers, and that all public offices who provide public services in Gaeltacht areas will operate through the medium of Irish, and the timescale for that is 2030. That has to be our target date when it's delivered. And I think, Minister, and you'll appreciate that that date should be fixed, just like 2030 is also fixed for a reduction in CO2 emissions, and that we are determined to reach that point. And it should be the date that all services from public bodies will be available to the Gaeltacht community in Irish from the state. It's really important that we include the Sína Fada. I mean, I spent many years working in Brussels, and I'll tell you that no respecting French speaker would tolerate the idea that the grave or the circumflex or any of their other accents were not part of the written word. It simply wouldn't be tolerated. So we have to ensure that that's how it's done here, because that's how it should be done. Anything else is just simply not appropriate. All forms, all public forms, whether it's driver's licences or passport applications, carers allowance forms or old age pensions, all should be bilingual. A study conducted by the Commissioner Chonga in 2018 illustrated that only 551 out of 21,000 staff working in government departments had sufficient competence in Irish to conduct business through Irish. Now, the numbers may have changed slightly, but even if they have, in 2018 it was only 3%, and that reflects the absolute need for this bill. It's also proposed that an Irish Language Statutory Advisory Committee be set up to support the work that we're speaking of here. And this, of course, will include the publication of the National Plan for an increase in the provision of public services through the medium of Irish. This plan is hugely important because it will ensure a systemic, planned, coordinated approach. However, the time frame for the drafting of this plan has to be put in place. It cannot be open-ended. There will be a duty on prescribed public bodies to facilitate the use of a person's name, address or title in the Irish language, and this includes the patronymical and matronymical forms of the name, which are of cultural significance, especially in the Gaeltacht areas. And actually, I think there's something we could learn from that. As I said, official forms should be published bilingually or in Irish. And also in regard to logos, it's proposed that public bodies, when renewing or altering their logos, should ensure that text which forms part of this new or altered logo shall be in the Irish language or in both Irish and English. And this plan that I spoke of, that will be produced by the Irish Language Statutory Advisory Committee, once that's in place, I think we need a yearly review in this House so that we as politicians can monitor its progress and implementation. And I think perhaps the Minister has proposed to do that. Also, the introduction of language standards are important, in fact essential. Now finally, Minister, we have the budget next week, and we look forward to hearing of a reversal of some of the cuts to Irish language bodies like First na Gaeilge, Conradh na Gaeilge, Glór na Gaeilge and Dáil Éireann, that those be reversed. Those cuts were seen as the low-hanging fruit during the last crisis, and they must be reversed. Also, cuts to Údarás funding. Those cuts have severely hit job creation in Gaeltacht areas. You know and I know, if there are no employment opportunities, people won't stay. Now we're talking about more and more people working from home, and whether that remains as it is now or it's partly working from home, partly working from the office, which is more likely where we'll end up. Nonetheless, this provides us now with a real opportunity to ensure better employment prospects in these areas. And that in itself, Minister, will have the knock-on effect of promoting the language. This bill is a good start, but it must be implemented. I know it is welcomed by the Irish-speaking community, and I've spoken to a number of them over the last number of days, but it must be supplemented by budgetary measures that support the language. Can I mention TG Cahir and also Radio Rero, but TG Cahir, not just for its promotion of the language, but for the fact that much of its content is produced in the community. It's not just the language, it's the participation and the involvement of different communities. And that's something that's hugely powerful. People have a sense of the language belonging to them. So, Minister, I'll finish and let my colleague speak. As I said, I welcome the bill because it does mean that this state is playing its part in giving legislative support to Irish speakers, and that is to be welcomed. Thank you.